Now we move on to our alumni speaker. Each year we choose a commencement speaker from the ranks of our alums, and this year's commencement speaker and the speaker we chose for 2021, and finally get him here in person, is Parag Mehta, Managing Director and President of the J.P. Morgan Chase Policy Center. He works with a team of experts who leverage the bank's assets, insights, and expertise to develop and advance policy solutions that drive inclusive economic growth in the United States and around the world. Prior to joining JPMC, he served as Senior Vice President and Executive Director of the MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth, the philanthropic hub of that company. Parag previously served as the Chief of Staff and Senior Advisor to the 19th Surgeon General of the United States, Dr. Vivek Murthy. Parag also spent more than 4 years directing communications for a civil rights agency in the U.S. Department of Labor, and served on Barack Obama's 2008 presidential transition team as a liaison to the Asian American and Pacific Islander communities and to the LGBTQ+ Americans. Parag earned a master's degree in public administration from the Maxwell School at Syracuse University and a BA, much more important, from Plan 2 honors program at the University of Texas at Austin. He and his husband, Vaibhav Jain, are currently petitioning the Delhi High Court in India for recognition of their marriage in a landmark case which could pave the way for marriage equality in the world's largest democracy. Parag, the podium is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wetlaufer. Good morning.
Good morning.
Oh, come on now. Good morning.
Good morning.
It is such a pleasure to be here with all of you today. Man, I was hoping for some play-on music. You think we could call the mariachi band back and have them play Taylor Swift's 22? I know. You're probably sick of hearing it, but honestly, I am feeling a little 22. You know, it's been 22 years since I got my Plan 2 degree. I was 22 years old when I left this campus and this state. I'm guessing many of you are on or about 22 years old. And of course, we are here to celebrate the class of 2022. Now, before I get started, I have to take care of a little bit of housekeeping. So when I say your name, or when you hear yourself being called, I'm going to ask that if you are able to, please stand and remain standing. First, if you gave birth to a member of the class of 2022, please stand and remain standing. Look at this lady with her hand up in the air. Stand up, mamas. Remain standing. If you fed, clothed, provided shelter, or otherwise provided for a member of the class of 2022, please stand and remain standing. If you ever offered a shoulder to cry on or a listening ear to one of our grads, please stand and remain standing. If you shared your toys, your bedroom, however begrudgingly, or a bathroom with one of these people, please stand up now. If you ever shared your wisdom with one of these people, if you taught them how to do something they didn't know before, please get up. And finally, if you provided any form of support, emotional, financial, technical, or logistical, to further their education, please stand and remain standing. Class of 2022, I now ask you to rise and see all these people who are standing around you, because even on your loneliest day, you have never been alone. They have always been by your side, and with your applause, please show them what they mean to you. You may all be seated. And that, kids, is how you engineer a standing ovation for your commencement speech. As Dr. Wetlaufer mentioned, I started writing this speech 2 years ago when she first extended me the great honor of being a commencement speaker. Of course, we all know why that got delayed, first for 1 year and then for 2. The irony is that I spent much of my college career asking for extensions on papers and assignments. Guys, I was really, really good at it. In fact, your program says that I was Plan 2 class of 2000. That's not exactly true. I was class of 98, and then I took a 5th year, we call it the victory lap, and then I asked for 1 more year to finish my senior thesis. So it feels like karmic retribution that this time around, it was UT asking me for an extension, which I granted. I want you to know that I took this assignment very seriously. I was diligent because I really wanted to do a good job for all of you. Well, technically speaking, for the 2 classes before you. So I called my beloved high school English teacher, Mary Adams, at Temple High School to get some advice. And specifically, I had this idea of building my speech around one of her lesson plans. She was ecstatic about the idea and told me it was perfect. But mostly, I just wanted an excuse to call Mrs. Adams and be her student one more time. A couple of weeks after our call, the United States went into lockdown and the speech got postponed. And over these past 2 years, I've written and rewritten my remarks multiple times, always seeking to be relevant to the moment in which we now find ourselves. You have to know that the stakes in these commencement speeches are really high. A few years ago, a UT commencement speaker told a group of assembled graduates to make their beds. It was a seemingly simple yet brilliant message, and the clip of his speech went viral on social media. Everybody went nuts over the admiral encouraging students to make their beds. In fact, that speech was so well received that they hired that guy to work here. Imagine if you write a speech so good you get a job out of it. Don't worry, I'm like my job. I'm not reaching for the stars here. But his argument was that making your bed is important because it gives you a feeling of accomplishment to start your day, and it gives you a comforting place to lay down your head even on the worst days. The Plan 2 version of this is to hack the whole bed-making process. Here's what you do. Make your bed really well, just once. And I'm talking square European shams and those clippy things that connect your duvet to your comforter. Splurge on bed suspenders. These are the things that hold your sheets together so tight that they never move. What I'm saying is, make yourselves one of those Pottery Barn beds. And then, when you go to sleep, just grab your favorite blanket and your raggedy pillow and sleep on top of that. And when you wake up in the morning, you throw the pillow and the blanket in the closet and you smooth out the spot where you slept, and voila, you have achieved a perfect bed. Plus, you can take satisfaction in knowing that your way was much faster, smarter, and just as effective as those poor suckers spending the first minutes of their day tucking and smoothing their way to glory. I like this idea of accomplishment. I think folks like us are drawn to achievement. We've been rewarded and recognized for it throughout our lives. It's Pavlovian for us. But do you want to know what will really make you feel like you've achieved something in life? Do something with your life to honor and appreciate the people for whom you just gave a standing ovation. Pay off your parents' mortgage or take them on their dream vacation. Yeah, parents? Or take them on their dream vacation. Keep in mind, theirs, not yours. Or find someone who makes you want to get under the covers and make a mess of that perfect bed, and then hold on to that person for as long as you can. Or just call a beloved teacher and let her know that you've been asked to give a commencement address. And the only reason you feel confident that you can do it is because she taught you how to write well. As we all know, the Plan 2 Honors Program is famous for teaching students how to write. It was here that I learned how to think about the world and how to put those thoughts into words that might help others understand their place in this world. When you leave this campus, hold on to all those lessons about logic and reasoning and critical thinking. Keep asking questions, and don't ever be afraid to look at everything, including our history, with a critical lens. And for those of you going to law school, Tanya, let me warn you, they are going to try and undo everything you learned here about how to write like a person. Lawyers have invented their own language, and I think that's what helps perpetuate the profession. After all, only they know how to interpret what they write, so we all become dependent on them. I don't mean this as a criticism of all the fine lawyers in the room, but Plan 2 grads, remember that you have another job. A liberal arts education instructs us to write and to speak in ways that enlighten others and make us all appreciate the complexity of the human condition. Put your education to use in helping us seek common ground and work together for the common good. I had the chance to meet with some of your classmates a few weeks ago, and they asked me to keep this positive and not harp on the negative aspects of the past few years. Don't use the word unprecedented, they begged. We're tired of hearing how we're living through the worst of times. Honestly, the thought had never even occurred to me, because my thesis is that we're actually living in the best of times. And in particular, I think the class of 2022 may be the luckiest generation of college graduates so far. Let me try to prove this with a logic exercise. If you could choose to be born in any year in all of human history, up to and including the year of your birth, what year would you choose? Here's the catch. You don't get to pick anything other than the year, not where you were born, or who you were born as, or what circumstances you were born into. Now, what year would you choose? As fascinated as we may be by the age of empires, remember that the Egyptians, the Chinese, the Greeks, and the Romans all had slaves. In fact, given the conditions of slavery and serfdom and every other kind of institutionalized servitude, I'd have to cross out every year leading up to the 20th century. Unfortunately, the last century was rough. You had extreme poverty, multiple pandemics, multiple genocides. Before labor unions, it was pretty miserable to be a worker in any part of the world. And statistically, you are far more likely to be born at the bottom of the pyramid than to be the architect of that deeply flawed design. For much of the 20th century, babies born with disabilities were euthanized in various parts of the world. And even if they were given the opportunity to live, have you noticed a lot of accessibility outside of the US and Canada? For half of my life, homosexuality was a criminal offense in much of the world and led to people being harassed, blackmailed, jailed, and even killed. The 1960s had some good music and good fashion, but consider this. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke in this very ballroom in March of 1962, and the threats to his security were so great that he had to spend the night in this building. We don't just stand on his shoulders, we get to live in the light he carved out for all of us. And this brings me to the half of our population that has had it pretty terrible for the bulk of humanity's time on Earth. As hard as it is to be a woman right now, consider that most countries didn't let women have a say in their own finances, their education, their government, or their very ability to move around until the modern era. My former UT professor, Sarah Weddington, made history when she was not much older than all of you. She stood before 9 male justices of the US Supreme Court and successfully argued that women should have the right to control their own bodies and be the final arbiters about their own health. What started in Texas did indeed change the world as more and more countries around the globe followed suit. We lost Professor Weddington in December, but if she were here, I'm sure she'd tell you that it is not enough to be the change. You have to work every day to guard the change too. So, we're at 1973 now. And you know what? We still have apartheid and AIDS and Ace of Base to get through. Your parents will explain who Ace of Base was. So that brings us to you, and to a moment about 22 years ago. Of all the years you could have been born, you picked the best one. Now, you might argue that it's unfair that you were born in the fires of 9/11, that you came of age during the Great Recession, and that you got severely waylaid by COVID. And I would remind you that there was once a generation born into a world war, put through the grinder of a Great Depression, and conscripted to serve in a Second World War. We call them the greatest generation. And that's in spite of the fact that too many of them normalized racism and sexism and a whole host of other ills. My point is this: I think that you can be the greater generation. I think that adversity reveals what you're truly capable of achieving. You took a huge disruption to your college experience and built community in ways that had never been done before. You found ways to serve one another and managed to get a world-class education over a laptop. And if you need proof of this, consider some of your classmates. Kyle and Jack Spear and Adriana Kelly, they stayed with Professor Hagar on Zoom while she was recovering for COVID just to keep her company. Or consider your classmate Alex Allen. She raised money to provide hundreds of books in English and Spanish for young students here in the Austin area. And many of you pitched in to help her. As soon as I stop talking and someone hands Alex a diploma, she's going to move to San Antonio to volunteer with AmeriCorps. And you know what she's going to do? She's going to be an English teacher. That brings me back to my English teacher, Mrs. Adams. She would be so proud of Alex and of all of you. I wish she was here today. But what she didn't tell me during that phone call 2 years ago was that she was ill. We lost Mrs. Adams last July. But you should know that the reason she was so excited about me coming to speak to you was that I was going to center my speech on a lesson that she taught us about the poet William Wordsworth. In his poem, My Heart Leaps Up, Wordsworth wrote, "The child is the father of the man." I remembered that line because when I was in high school, Mrs. Adams taught us that during the Vietnam War, students protesting outside this very building used to take courage from those words. They used that line to validate their voices before an administration and a government that wasn't listening. The child is the father of the man is this notion that every soul is born into this world pure and filled with divine knowledge. It is the living that takes us further away from the truth. Wordsworth was saying that children and young adults are the keepers of the divine truths of the universe, and you have a moral obligation to be the bridge between the divine and those of us who have been away from it for too long. Human progress has been extraordinary. We just saw that in the exercise we did. Humanity is far better today than ever before. But progress is not inevitable. We have to fight for every bit of it. You have to give voice to the idea whose time has come. You have to stand up for those who are being left out and left behind. And then, and this is the key part, you have to remain standing. This place taught you to write, to think, to reason, and to learn. Keep doing that. Be lifelong learners. Turn your pain into purpose. And you may just hold on to the secrets of the divine universe a little bit longer. Congratulations to all of you. Make good choices, be safe, and have the best lives. Thank you.